Hello again and welcome back to our course on Excel 2013 Advanced. In this section we're going to take a look at lookup and reference functions. There are just under 20 of these in Excel 2013, and in this section I'm going to concentrate on the two that are both probably the most popular lookup and reference functions, and also the functions that a lot of people struggle with getting quite right, and that's HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP. Basically, these two functions do the same thing, and that is they look something up as though they're looking up in a reference document or maybe in a database, getting some information from one table based on an index from another table. The difference between them is that in the case of HLOOKUP, the values that they're looking up are arranged horizontally, and in the case of VLOOKUP, they're arranged vertically. Both of them also have a major choice that you make, which is whether you're trying to exactly match what you're looking up or you're just trying to match it approximately or within some kind of range. So I'm back at the insurance policy sales figures for Orlando, and what I'm going to do is to classify the monthly sales by the quartile in which they occurred. So the first thing I need to do is to calculate what the quartile values are. Now I'm going to put the first quartile value in here, so the function I use is quartile. I'm going to use quartile.inc. I need to put in the array containing the data, so you should remember that we set up a name for that. That's Policy Sales Orlando, and for the first quartile, okay, that's 86.25. Let me now fill that right, and I want the second quartile, third quartile, and fourth quartile. Now, of course, the other thing to bear in mind is that there is a beginning, a bottom end, if you like, a lowest number here, a zeroth quartile, if you like, of 0. So if I wanted to divide all of these policy sale figures into the four quartiles, the numbers of policy sales per month that establish those quartiles are 0, 86.25, which is the first quartile, 111, 139.25, 189. Now the way this is going to work is that we are going to take each of the policy figures, so for January 09 that's 114, and we're basically going to look it up in this list to work out which quartile it should be in. The values we're looking up then are horizontally arranged, and therefore we're going to use HLOOKUP. If I'd put the numbers downwards, 0, 86.25, 111, etc., we would have been arranging them vertically, and we would have used VLOOKUP. So the way that HLOOKUP works is this. I give it a value, in this case 114. It starts at the beginning of the list and compares each value in the list. So it says 0, okay, 114 is bigger than 0. 86.25, okay, 114 is bigger than that. 111, okay, it's bigger than that. It eventually gets to a value which is greater than 114, or of course it might get to the end of the list. When it finds a value greater than the value I've given it, it basically returns a categorization or a reference value for the one before. So it's looking for a value in this list less than or equal to 114. So the value that it finds will be 111. So 111 needs to return a value of 3 because I want it to say it's in the third quartile. And that basically tells you how we set up our quartile values, because if I move on to say 140, 0, no, 86.25, no, still bigger, 139.25, still bigger, eventually it gets to the last value, 189, and it will say, okay, 189 is too big, it's that one I want, 139.25, it's in the fourth quartile. Now, the very final value, the maximum, also needs to return 4, because if I actually have a value that's equal to the highest value, it's going to be in the fourth quartile. So that is my lookup table for the use of this HLOOKUP function. The easiest way to set this function up generally is, once I've established my table, is to set it up as a name. So I'm going to define a name. I'm going to call it, I'm just going to call it lookup table. Not a very inventive name. And I've now set up my lookup table. Okay, so let's now try using the lookup function. I'm going to click in cell D4 and I'm going to type in there equals H lookup. Now first of all, what's the value that I want to look up? Well, it's C4. And the table array, where is my lookup table? Well, I've given it a name. I've called it lookup table. And the next question is, when you look it up, which is the value that you want to return? You're going to start looking in that first row, but which row in the table gives the value that you want to return? Well, it's the second row, so I'm going to put in there comma 2. And then the last option, range lookup, is either true or false. If you put true, which is the default, then it will do an approximate match. It will do a match on the basis that I just described, where it's looking for a value less than or equal to the lookup value. If I set that to false, then it would look for an exact match. So I'm going to set that at true. Tick. And what we find is that 114 is in the third quartile. And that appears to be correct to me. So let's just do a fill down of a few, just a little bit of a test. So 102 is in the second quartile. That looks correct. So on. I've got a whole load in the fourth quartile. Appears to be working fine. Let's fill it right down to the bottom. And there we are. Every cell that's occupied in column D now specifies the quartile for whatever the number of policies sold was in that month in the Orlando branch. Now I'm going to demonstrate the use of the VLOOKUP function, and in this case we're going to do an exact match. The worksheet you're looking at the moment is a catalogue. It's a catalogue of parts for a company that provides materials, hardware materials, door handles, that sort of thing. And I've got a section of the catalogue here. I've just got 3 columns of information. Column A contains a part number. Column B contains a description of the part. And column C contains a price. In this case, the prices are given in UK pounds. Now what I want to do is to use this catalogue to help me to produce invoices for my customers. So on sheet 1 of this workbook, I've actually got a draft of an invoice. It's going to have a date, it's going to have an invoice number, I'm going to put some sort of logo or some graphics at the top. But basically the way the invoice works is this. I'm going to specify the quantity of a part. I'm going to put the part number in here, the description of the part in here, the unit price here, and the total price here. Now what I don't want to have to do is to put in a part number and then go to the catalogue, carefully read down and do some sort of copy and paste of the right description. I want both the description and the price to be automatically filled in on the invoice when I enter a part number. So the part number will be entered there, and automatically I want to see the description appear here and the price appear here. So the key to all this is the part number. The part number is the thing that I'm going to look up in the catalogue. And if I just go back to the catalogue, the part numbers are arranged vertically, so I need a VLOOKUP because I'm going to look through a vertical list of the index items in this case, which are part numbers. Now I know I'm going to need to look up in the catalogue, so first thing I'm going to do is to define a name for the catalogue. So let me select, I've only actually got a section of the catalogue here, it's not the whole thing. I'll select that. Formulas, define name. I'm going to define a name of parts catalogue. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to sheet 1 where I'm creating the invoice. And the basic principle on which I'm going to work is this. When I enter a part number in here, I want to get the description in here. So in the description field here, I'm going to need to put equals v lookup. Now what am I going to look up? Well, the lookup value on that row is going to be C7. What table array am I going to look up? Well, I've just set up the parts catalog, so it's going to be parts catalog. Now, of course, I could put that in terms of cell references on another worksheet in this workbook, but it is really very convenient to use names for this. And then next, column index number. Which column am I looking at? The description column was the second column, so I just need a 2 in there. And am I doing a range lookup? Am I looking at a less than or equal, or am I looking for an exact match? Well, in this case, I need an exact match. So I'm going to put false in there. Now, what I get here is NA. I don't want you to worry too much about NA. Basically, what it means is it can't find that entry in the catalogue because, of course, there is no part number which is blank. But if I put a real part number in here, let's put in 25189. Let's see what happens. Now I get an actual description from the catalogue. Now let me deal with the price of this part. So again, it's going to be a VLOOKUP. I'm still looking up C7 in this case. I'm still looking in the parts catalogue. But this time the column that I need is not column 2, it's column 3, because that's the column with the price in it. And I still need false for an exact match. Tick on that, and I find that the price of that item is £13.33. Now, of course, I could enter quantity here and multiply quantity by unit price to give me total price. That's maybe something you'd like to try out yourself. But in terms of the use of the VLOOKUP, that function, that's basically how it works and what it does. Now, as I mentioned just now, we have a problem in that if I were to fill down this description so that I could use it for other rows in the order details, I'd get that NA problem, and I'm going to talk about that NA problem in the next section where we're going to look at logical functions. For the moment, of course, if I don't fill down, then everything's fine, but I would need to copy and paste or fill down one at a time the contents of the description field in the order details section and the unit price field as well each time I put a new part number in, which is going to be a little bit of a pain if I have to keep copying and pasting or filling down. I'd really like to be able to fill this all up right at the start, but as I say, I'll come back to that in the next section. As I said at the beginning of this section, HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP are very heavily used functions, and quite a few people do have some trouble with them. I think once you're used to them, they're pretty straightforward. And there are various other functions amongst the lookup and reference functions that you should find pretty useful. I'm just going to look at one other now. This is the choose function, which is a little bit underused. It's like a very simple lookup function. And let me just give you a quick demo of how you might use that. Let's suppose you've got a particular situation. Say if I take a section of one of the scorecards that we looked at earlier on in the course. John, Jane, Jim, etc. have each given their opinion of something. So they've scored something on the range 1 to 5. And we're going to interpret each of those values 1 to 5 in a different way. I'm sure you've done the sort of thing in an opinion poll, strongly agree, strongly disagree, etc. We could set up a lookup table, and for each score, for each person doing the test, we'd look up their score and turn their score into a term like strongly agree or disagree or undecided. But you can use the choose function when you have a small number of options, and you can build the whole thing into the use of the function. So what I would do in this case, let's suppose that I want to interpret John's score of 1. And I'm going to put the interpretation into the cell B3. If I use the choose function, it's choose. Which score am I going to interpret? Well, it's B2. That's John's score. If his score's 1, I'm going to say that means strongly disagree. If the score's 2, I'm going to say it means if it's 3, and so on. Now, I can do that with as many options as I like, but clearly it would be quite impractical to use it for dozens of options. But having done that, if I then do a fill right in this case, and let me just spread them all out a bit more so you can read what they actually say, you can say it's a pretty good way of interpreting a limited number of options. So that's the choose function. That's it for lookup and reference functions. In the next section we're going to look at logical functions. Please join me for that.